The night the 7-foot giant charged the emergency room, the building seemed to shrink around him, walls trembling under the weight of his rage, fear, and grief, as if the hospital itself knew something terrible was about to happen. Fluorescent lights flickered, stretchers rattled, and every instinct in every trained professional screamed that this was about to turn violent, because some storms don't arrive with thunder but with heavy footsteps and broken breathing that sounds like a man drowning on dry land. Before the story goes any further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet power of compassion, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, share it with someone who needs hope tonight, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Your support keeps stories like this alive. The man's name was Lucas Hale, and he looked less like a human being and more like a walking wall of muscle and scars, his shoulders hunched, his eyes wild, his hands shaking as if they no longer belonged to him. He had ducked through the ER doors, tearing the automatic glass apart like paper, his head nearly scraping the ceiling, his chest heaving as alarms screamed and patients recoiled in terror. He was 7 feet tall, built like someone who had lived a life of lifting pain for a living, and every step he took carried the threat of disaster. Security froze, nurses backed away, doctors instinctively searched for exits, and the room filled with the sharp metallic scent of fear. He wasn't holding a weapon, but his body itself looked like one, and the grief burning behind his eyes made him unpredictable. Moments earlier, he had been kneeling in the rain outside the hospital, cradling his younger sister's lifeless body after a car accident that had torn their small family apart. The ambulance that brought her in had arrived too late, and somewhere between the sirens fading and the ER doors closing, Lucas felt the last thread holding his world together snap. He believed the hospital had failed her, believed the universe had cheated him again, and when he finally forced his way inside, it wasn't to hurt anyone, but to scream at a fate that had already taken too much. Unfortunately, pain doesn't announce its intentions clearly, and everyone saw only a giant charging forward, not a brother drowning in loss. That was when Emily Carter stepped into his path. Emily was new, barely 3 months into her nursing career, still wearing shoes that squeaked slightly on polished floors, still double-checking medication dosages even when she was sure she was right. She had been called a rookie more than once, sometimes kindly, sometimes not, and she carried the quiet insecurity of someone who desperately wanted to be good at saving lives but wasn't yet convinced she deserved to be there. She wasn't tall, wasn't intimidating, and didn't have the hardened edges of nurses who had spent decades in trauma wards. What she had was a past full of its own cracks, a childhood shaped by a father whose anger filled rooms the way Lucas now did, and a promise she had made to herself that fear would not decide her actions anymore. As Lucas stormed forward, shouting wordlessly through clenched teeth, Emily didn't raise her hands or step back. She didn't reach for a panic button or scream for security. Instead, she planted her feet and met his eyes, feeling her heart hammer so loudly she was sure he could hear it. She saw past the size, past the danger, and recognized the exact same look she had seen years ago in her own mirror after her mother died, the look of someone who had lost everything and didn't know where to put the pain. The ER held its breath as she approached him slowly, not as a challenge, but as an offering of presence. Instantly, everything changed. Emily didn't touch him, didn't restrain him, didn't try to overpower what no one there could. She lowered her posture, softened her expression, and let empathy do what force never could. She acknowledged his loss without words, her face reflecting understanding rather than authority. Lucas's charge slowed, then stopped entirely, his massive body trembling as if the anger had nowhere left to go. The giant who had moments earlier seemed unstoppable now looked like a child standing alone in the dark. His fists unclenched. His shoulders sagged. The air shifted, heavy but calmer, like the moment after a storm breaks. What took him down was not strength, but recognition. Emily's presence reminded him that someone still saw him as human, not a threat, not a problem to be restrained. His breathing steadied, his eyes filled, and the weight of his sister's death finally crashed over him in full. He sank to his knees, the sound echoing through the ER, and the danger everyone feared dissolved into raw, heartbreaking grief. Nurses rushed forward cautiously, doctors returned to their posts, and security quietly stepped back, stunned by what they had just witnessed. Emily stayed with him as he cried, grounding him back to reality, guiding him toward the help he needed. In that moment, she understood something no textbook had ever taught her, that healing doesn't always begin with medicine or procedures, but with the courage to stand still in someone else's pain. Lucas was later admitted for evaluation, not as a criminal, but as a man in crisis, and the hospital staff who had once feared him now spoke his name with softness and respect. In the days that followed, the story spread quietly through the hospital halls. Doctors who had once doubted Emily's readiness looked at her differently. Veteran nurses nodded with approval they rarely gave. Emily herself struggled to process what she had done, replaying the moment over and over, realizing that the very sensitivity she once thought was a weakness had saved lives that night, including possibly her own. She visited Lucas during his recovery, watching him slowly rebuild himself from the ashes of loss, and in helping him, she healed parts of herself she didn't even know were still broken. Lucas eventually left the hospital with resources, support, and a future that, while scarred, was no longer empty. Emily continued her work, no longer just a rookie in name, but a nurse who understood the true meaning of courage. The ER returned to its routine chaos, but something unseen had changed within its walls, a reminder that even the most terrifying moments can be transformed by compassion. If this story touched your heart, reminded you of the power of kindness, or showed you that empathy can stop even the fiercest storms, please take a moment to like this video, share it, and engage with the channel. Your support helps bring more meaningful stories like this into the world. Comment where you are watching from and what part of this story moved you the most. And as the lights dimmed that night and the hospital settled into uneasy silence, one truth lingered in the air, that sometimes the strongest force in the room isn't the giant charging forward, but the quiet soul brave enough to stand still and care.